Hi, this is Randall with Carter Hill Honeybees of Northwest Alabama. Today is March 8th, 2021. It's been a great day. Warm today, probably around 65, 70 degrees. Well, here in Northwest Alabama, it's time for me to do my first maneuver in swarm prevention, which is going to bring me to tell you about my first big influence in beekeeping. A gentleman that used to write in bee culture. I talked with him a time or two on the phone, and I met him in person one day near his home and talked with him a couple of hours. That gentleman's name is Walt Wright. He's no longer with us. He wrote countless articles in bee culture. I bought a 61-page booklet called Nectar Management. I've probably read it 4 or 5 times. I read all of his articles in bee culture back in the day. At that time, we didn't know nothing about the YouTube, or at least I didn't. That was my best source of information at the time. Turn the clock ahead about 10 years. I've had real good luck with his nectar management program. I really like it, but I'm going to tweak some things this year and try some different things. I've learned some new stuff in the last year, mostly some good stuff here on YouTube from some other excellent beekeepers that I've never known of until about a year ago this time. So I'm going to try to incorporate some of the new stuff I've learned into the checkerboarding and see if I can make it a little bit better for me and what I need to get accomplished, specifically with mite management. Back in the day when I first discovered this, what got me interested in Walt is he lives only about 100 miles north of me at the Alabama-Tennessee line. This is every article I could find pertaining that Walt Wright did. I don't know if this is all that he wrote. I think some of this material come off of Bee Source, a lot of it come out of bee culture, and I've read every one of these articles. It's been a while, but he definitely had a different viewpoint, and very intelligent man. I thought at the time I was really privileged to have met him and learned from him. It had a significant impact on me. Here's a copy of the booklet I bought from him that day. It's called Nectar Management Principles and Practices by Walt Wright. And this is really an interesting read. It's 61 pages long. He basically goes through the survival instincts of honeybees and where they came from in Europe. And he has lots of good pictures and diagrams in this book of how the bees will build up and issue their reproductive swarm in the spring. Now this right here is an interesting chart. He bases everything on his reproductive swarm cutoff date. That seems to be the key timing, to initiate your swarm prevention practices that you're going to do. I've sat and studied this a pretty good amount of time. Tried to memorize most of it, but it's pretty straightforward once you get familiar with it. I was really new in beekeeping when I first found this. And here's yet another chart that he put in here. Basically what the colony's doing from the time that they get reliable pollen coming in all the way up to reproductive swarm cutoff date, which he says occurs during the middle of apple tree bloom in this area. And I think for the most part that's pretty much right. Now the swarms will come after that time for sure, but according to him, they tend to abandon the swarming instinct around that time, and then they'll transition to rearing waxmaker bees and superseding their queen, and in preparation for the upcoming winter honey storage. And then 3 weeks after the cutoff is when the white wax flow will start, when you start seeing fresh white wax in your colony. At that time, they start reducing the brood nest and concentrate on storing honey for the upcoming winter. This is primarily focused on the time prior to swarm issue. This is probably my favorite chart in here, but it's got a timeline in here, February, and it has the trees that are blooming, what the colony's objective is, the operational differences, what's going on, and the effects that causes. So this is really an interesting part to me right here. Basically sums up the whole book. And right here's the results that he published in here in 1996. No swarms averaged 80 pounds a colony. 97, no swarms, 130 pounds. 98, 180 pounds with some swarms. No swarms in 99, 80 pounds. No swarms in year 2000 and 145 pounds a colony. That's pretty impressive. Once I figured this out, I've never really weighed it out, but I consistently get 4 or 5 mediums fully capped using this method in my healthy colonies. And if I got some that's struggling, which I have a lot over the years because I've been no treatment, but this will be my first year doing this with healthy bees. During the second year of my colonies' lives, they produced the best honey, and my guess is because the mites was growing, but they haven't grown enough to really weaken them down like they do the third and the fourth year. The second year of a colony's existence, they always made the most honey for me. But I have gotten as high as 6, and one colony a couple years ago, I got 7 fully capped mediums off of it. So it's really, really impressive at the amount of honey that they can store. And right here, he kind of shows what to look for. You brood basically there, and you kind of read the open gap in there to see what's going on. You're hoping to see nectar and maybe some pollen resources up there. Now here's a graph that definitely talks about what pretty much the whole cycle from late winter, midwinter through summer. So here's the time your reliable forage starts. That's when you're going to start seeing the pollen coming in reliably. You'll also see the honeybees gathering water out of any mud hole or wet spot in the yard. They're thinning that capped honey at that point. Once you start seeing that, you basically got 6 weeks to configure your colonies in the checkerboarding technique, which I will be demonstrating shortly. Once they commit to swarm 6 weeks from that time, then about 3 weeks after that point, they should issue the reproductive swarm. But the colonies that don't swarm, they're going to rear the wax processors. That takes about 3 weeks. And he says that the colonies pretty much don't gain any weight during that time. I also found most of the time I've tried doing some stuff during that time, most of my production colonies, my guess is the tremendous brood production, it must really use up the queen, because most of them seem to supersede their queen during this time. So I will not go down in the brood during this time for fear of tearing up queen cells, because I've done it several times before. Then once the white wax starts around the 1st of May, then from there, they store honey from there to the end of the nectar flow, which here is probably going to be sometime mid to late June is when our nectar cuts off. Sometimes we'll have a little bit of sourwood flow, and it'll go on into past July 4th a little bit, but for the most part, mid to late June pretty much wraps our nectar flow up. Then we have a couple months of dearth until late August, early September, when kudzu and goldenrod starts coming in. There's another picture. He's basically showing you know, how you're going to have your colony configured pretty much now, how it's going to look, you know, 4 to 6 weeks from now. And right here's my fully drawn out supers I've had in storage since last July. I have about 145 of them all together. And this is how I store them. I stack them up 7 high, use the paramoth crystals, got a spacer under there. This is very critical to make the checkerboarding technique work. So we're fixing to tote some of these out to the truck and go hit the yard. I need to take a moment and talk about the importance of the frames, the combs that you're going to use to do this maneuver with. In order for this to be successful, you must have a fully drawn out medium. They need to be deep enough that they can rear brood in. I don't know the exact number, but it's probably, the cells need to be about a 1/2 inch deep. This is an example of one. This is fully drawn. This is a comb I extracted honey from last year, and I stored it over winter to use this year for the bees. It's important when you uncap your honey, if you use an uncapping knife, to not cut too deep. You want to leave about a 1/2 inch up here. That's very important for this to work. So use caution if you use a uncapping knife to if you plan on trying to do this maneuver. The bees are not really inclined to draw comb out much prior to swarm season. They will some, but in my experience, it's not that great. But so if you take a little extra care with your uncapping technique, you'll have some good combs to do this maneuver with. Also, if you'll run across this situation with, you're going to get partially drawn frames, some bad frames, or some that has drones, a lot of drone cells in it. You want to have worker cells in the middle above the brood nest. So you can take those partials, those drone cells, and put them on the wall on the outside, and the bees will utilize it best as possible. They may go ahead and rear the drones out, and then they'll fill it with honey, or as the white wax flow comes in, they'll finish drawing the frame most of the time. But you probably want at least 2/3 of the frame drawn out to that depth. Anything less and you run the risk of it not being good enough. Here's one of my colonies coming out of winter that I have configured the Walt Wright way based on his book. At this time of the year, this box here, this medium, is drawn out. It should be empty from the previous fall. This is what he refers to as a pollen box. And right now, hopefully most of the brood is in this deep, and some of it will be in this first medium. Now, there's going to be times, especially if there wasn't enough stores in the winter, that the bees may move up here and be in the top, and in that case I'll have to rotate it down and kind of do a couple of different things through time. But if everything's just right, you'll have some brood and some resources. This should be mostly capped honey here. What I'm about to demonstrate is stacking this down to the bottom board and taking this super to the side and setting this directly on the bottom board, and then setting the brood right back up on top. And then I'll take an empty medium that's fully drawn out, and I'll do the checkerboard procedure with this super, and then that other super that'll be added up here, and then I'll put one empty fully drawn medium on top of that. That is enough to get the colony through the swarm cutoff date, which in this area of northwest Alabama is roughly around April the 5th, maybe April 1st. It varies a little from year to year. And he explains in that book, if you want to try to figure out when it was in your area, you kind of wait for white wax to first appear, and then you can count back 3 weeks, and that'll give you pretty much the day of what he calls the swarm cutoff. Now, when you can implement this, in my area, what I look for is when there's a reliable source of pollen coming in. And once I see that, when the bees start bringing in these big balls of pollen consistently, you have about a 6-week window to do this manipulation. I try to wait till the last week and a half or so to do it. The weather's much better and stuff to do it at that time. Today is I believe March the 8th, but my window here is typically from February 20th to March the 10th to try to get this done, and I'll try to get it done more towards the end of February and early March. Well, I'm fixing to get my smoker lit, and we're gonna rearrange this colony, and I'm going to demonstrate how Walt Wright taught me to do the checkerboarding procedure. First thing we're going to do is resituate this box and get that super off the bottom. All right, I've got my box reconfigured. It's got that medium off the bottom. Now we're ready to do the nectar management checkerboarding procedure. Best I can tell, there's no brood up in here. This box is pretty full of honey. There's 2 ways you can go with this. You can do it either way. Sometimes I do it both. You can pull out basically 5 frames from one side and stack them on the ground or whatever, and move them over and alternate them, or you can take out every other frame and do it that way. All right, in this first medium, I usually leave a frame full of honey on the outside wall. So I'm just going to come one in from the outside and start pulling frames. So I got 4 frames out sitting on the ground. They're fully capped honey. So now I'm going to start introducing the fully drawn empties back in here. So we got a full here, putting an empty here. Going to bring over a capped honey, empty frame, full frame of honey, empty frame, full frame, and finally an empty frame. So the first box is complete. So I'm going to review. We've got a full, empty, full, empty, full, empty, full, empty, and a full. That's going to leave us 4 frames in this box. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up here, set it on top. So I want to wind up with frames opposite of what I had underneath. So I'm going to start on the outside with empty. So I'm going to go empty, full, empty. And I'll put a full on the other end. somehow or another I've come up a frame short in this deal. And then finally finishing up with this empty. So I pulled the box back off the review. So here we go, I've got both supers complete. So we have a full, empty, full, empty, full, empty, full, empty, full. And then the next super, I have it done the opposite way. This is empty, full, empty, full, empty, full, empty, full, empty. So if you was to turn these boxes up, straight up and down or 90 degrees from where they are now, it would really resemble a checkerboard in that the full and empties are the same pattern as you'd see on a checkerboard, and that's where the name comes from. All right, after we've completed the checkerboarding maneuver, take the super that was originally on the bottom board, just simply put it on top, and it's going to be fully empty. So that completes the checkerboard maneuver for this particular colony. So kind of to review again, I took this super, was originally down here underneath the hot body. So I unstacked it down, took it off. This box is empty except for the field force that is in there. Might be a little pollen, but it's usually empty. The brood box had brood, which is supposed to. Decent amount of brood in this first medium. We didn't touch it in any way. The second medium was entirely capped honey. So then I took a empty medium with fully drawn comb and I checkerboarded it. I took the second medium here that was entirely full of honey, capped honey, and then this was an empty, fully drawn medium. So I exchanged some of the frames, checkerboarded it, if you will, and then I come back and put the empty medium that was on the bottom board up here on top of the stack. This is enough to get the colony through swarm season. If I didn't want to, I wouldn't have to come back and revisit this colony probably until middle or latter part of April, which is about 4 to 6 weeks from now. And by that time, there should be a tremendous population explosion. At least in my experience, I just reduced the odds of this colony swarming by about 85 to 90%. The bottom line, or the secret to how this thing works, is the way Walt put it, is a colony that has an expanding brood nest through swarm cutoff date will not swarm. And about 85–90% of the time, I'm going to agree with that. They do swarm from time to time. I don't know exactly why. Maybe it's a mistake I made in setting it up. But when they swarm, it's usually big swarms. You could use this technique to make a lot of bees. The disadvantages is it takes a lot of equipment. I commit 5 to 6 fully drawn mediums to this. You can get some foundation drawn out with these two. I'm going to try putting some random frames in here once I get past the swarm cutoff, see if they'll draw some foundation for me that way. In the past, I've put it on the top, usually at the 1st of May, right at the peak of the nectar flow, and I usually get 1 to 2 drawn out that way. Now, as I stated earlier, I'm going to trend away from the pollen box at the bottom. This year I've committed myself to keeping mites under control and keeping them treated. In less than a year of doing this, I've seen a tremendous difference in my colonies. My bees are a lot healthier, so in my mind I know this is the way to go for me. So I want to trend away from this and get down, instead of having that big winter configuration like I showed at the beginning here. I want a winter in either a single deep or a deep and a medium. I'm going to probably try both ways and see how it goes. But it'll make this maneuver a lot easier come next spring, because a whole lot less work to tear this down and restack it. And plus I'll have better control over my mite treatments by keeping my brood nest contained down here. Something else different I'll probably do. I've never used a queen excluder in honey production before, so I'm probably going to come back here towards the end of April and shake these bees all the way down, either to this medium or all the way down to the deep. I'm going to put a queen excluder and restack it back up, let the brood emerge, and that'll give a place for the backfill honey along with the top. And I'm hoping that will make honey harvest easier, and also hoping it will help me get started with my mite treatment and mite wash, as I have all that to do right after honey harvest. All right, here's a deep and a medium. This is a swarm I caught last year. I handle it very similarly, but I'm fixing to demonstrate to you how I do it. You'll have to break up the brood a little bit with this one, but it don't seem to hurt. That's one reason I wait this late to do it. That helps with that, but it still works this way pretty well. So this one should be mostly full of honey. There should be some brood up in here. I don't see any yet. Actually, I can see a little bit down in that frame. And I'm going to attack it pretty much the same way I did the others. I'm going to leave one on the wall. All right, there's some brood. So I want to leave this brood downstairs. So to do that, I'm going to go through and find the other side and just pull the honey. I'm going to contain all my brood nests down here. So now I'm going to start out putting this is full honey, and here's going to be empty. Here's a frame with honey, resources, and brood. I'm going to put another empty, slide the brood back over. Another empty, slide that brood back over. And then I'm going to go ahead and put this last empty in there. Now at this point, right here, I think today's March 7th or 8th. There's plenty of bees in here. That separation of brood and plus the weather looks good for the next 7 to 10 days. It's not really going to affect it, or it has not in my experience. So I've had real good luck doing this. So here I put my other box on. Now I'm only going to have 3 frames of resources put up here, but that's fine. So I'll start out with an empty on each side. Probably go ahead and do 2 empties on each side. Then put a honey, 2 empties, 1 frame of honey close to the wall over here. So now I've got the brood checkerboarded in these 2 boxes. Now I'm just going to go ahead and put me 2 more drawn out mediums on top. We got a checkerboard, empty medium, empty medium. So this colony has plenty of room to store nectar and incoming pollen for the next 6 weeks. Well, the change in my management technique, I'm hoping in the future is going to lead to this. I don't know if it will or not, but this is a colony overwintered in a single deep. Seem to be doing fine. They still got a lot of weight. But this is in addition to being able to better treat for mites and keep them under control in this configuration. Here's the other time-saving benefit I'm going to love from this. So with this colony, I brought 3 supers up here. It's still behind a little bit. These are some of my carnioles, so I'm not going to just put all 3 of these on here. I thought there'd be a little bit more bees in this. So for today, I'm just going to put 2 medium supers up here. And this is the beauty of being able to winter in single deeps. Just come in here and set your supers on here and you're done. You got to do all that tearing down. Of course, I guess it's a trade-off. You know, obviously I'm probably going to have to feed the bees doing it that way, but it's kind of easier to feed the bees in the late summer than it is to try to find good days here in the late winter to do this. And this is much faster. So I've just demonstrated to you on 3 different style colonies how I execute the checkerboard nectar management technique. This being a single deep with nothing on it, overwintering it in single, and I had a single and a medium right there. And then down beside that, the first one we done was the traditional overwintering technique that Walt teaches with 2 mediums on top and a medium on the bottom board. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something useful out of it. Appreciate you for joining me, and we'll see you in the next video.